Good morning, I'm Gretchen Hall. It is a brand new week, the ninth day of June, bringing you Morning Matters because your mornings matter. Let's get to the stories that matter today. Several universities have joined the call for the Senate to immediately proceed with the impeachment trial of Vice President Sara Duterte. The Philippine Bar Association, meanwhile, emphasized that the Constitution clearly mandates the Senate to begin the trial immediately upon receiving the ratified complaint. DSWD confirmed that Rose, the woman seen crawling out of a drainage canal in Makati, admitted to occasional drug use. DSWD said Rose will undergo rehabilitation with social workers guiding her and her partner toward reintegration into the community. And after conquering the summit of Mount Everest, Filipino mountaineers Geno Panganiban and Miguel Mapalad have arrived home, having made history as the first Filipinos in 18 years to reach the peak of the world's highest mountain. Welcome to our program, Morning Matters, where we talk about the issues you need to know for the rest of your day. Now, first on the agenda, more schools have urged the Senate to proceed with the impeachment trial of Sara Duterte. It is set to begin this week. Here is a report.
Several universities have joined calls urging the Senate to proceed with the impeachment trial of Vice President Sara Duterte. These include the Ateneo Law Schools and the University of Santo Tomas. The Ateneo Law School's deans emphasize that public office is a public trust and that accountability cannot and should not be overridden by obfuscating technicalities. They added that faithful obedience to the constitutional mandates is requisite and mandatory, hence not discretionary and optional. The deans also called for a fair, impartial, and speedy disposition of the case. In a social media post, UST also released a statement urging the Senate to proceed with the impeachment trial. It called for respect to the Constitution and fulfillment of duty. For members of the UP College of Law faculty, the premature dismissal of the complaint will undermine the democratic principle of checks and balances. They added that if the impeachment continued, this would uphold the upper chamber's mandate of trust and accountability. The De La Salle University, meanwhile, said any attempts to suppress the impeachment process undermines the pursuit of the truth and the principle that no one is above the law. The Philippine Bar Association, for its part, noted that the Constitution's wording is clear that the Senate should have started the trial once it had received the ratified complaint. Senator Sherwin Gatchalian and Francis Tolentino on Sunday assured the public that the impeachment trial will proceed on June 11. Both Gatchalian and Tolentino agreed that failing to convene Duterte's impeachment court could cause integrity issues for the Senate.
Last week, members of the UP Law faculty also called on the Senate to begin Sara Duterte's impeachment trial. And for that, we have on the show today, we have UP Law Assistant Professor Paulo Tamase joining us on Morning Matters. Good morning. Welcome to the program.
Morning, Gretchen, and good morning to your viewers.
Hey, Professor, the Office of Senator Tolentino has released a calendar with a 19-day expedited impeachment trial. It seems to have given both the prosecution and the defense about 2 days to present their case. What are your thoughts? Giving the office the benefit of the doubt here for this trial to have no constitutional impediments or questions, for him, it probably would be the best case scenario. Your thoughts on that?
I think on the one hand, it's a good sign that because there is already a calendar being floated by one of the senators who questioned, we're actually called for the de facto dismissal, then there might be a changing or a sign that the Senate has first the impeachment trial. But at the same time, I'm a little, personally, and I haven't really discussed this with colleagues yet, I'm a little concerned with efforts to speed up the trial to potentially reasonable extent. Days to present evidence might not be enough, whether for prosecution or defense. And I think the premise of the schedule is that they have to finish by June 30, which is not is based on evidence released in many other universities.
Okay, but is it feasible to do this under that 19-day trial?
My personal view is it's not. So, if we look at the experience of past impeachment trials, we have not lasted less. In the case of impeachment, it took 5 months to present one charge, uh, one article of impeachment. The Estrada impeachment, it took at least a month of presentation by the prosecution before that pivotal moment in where EDSA 2 started. So in any event, it doesn't seem to be, when they're proposed 2 days doesn't seem to be enough. Now there is in the United States where a child is this fast, but the thing is that different is that the Senate there scheduled or commissioned a committee to do the evidence gathering. Senators were doing it on time. I don't think it's in the schedule or it's stated in the schedule, so it might not be feasible to have time.
Okay, Professor, you're coming in a little bit choppy over here. So, because this is an important discussion, I think we'll take some time to fix your signal so that we can have a meaningful conversation about this. Okay, we'll get back to you later, but in the meantime, please don't go away. We'll be back with more stories right after a quick break. Welcome back. You're still watching Morning Matters to talk about the impeachment and more. We have on the show once again UP Law Assistant Professor Paulo Tamase. The UP Diliman has released, of course, a statement for this impeachment trial to proceed forthwith and talking about it, about this 19-day expedited impeachment trial. I'd just like to ask you again, because we didn't get you quite clear a while ago, is it possible to have this trial done in 19 days?
Again, Gretchen, so I hope this is much better.
Yes.
I think the 19-day trial might not be realistic. We can compare it to the practice of the Philippine Senate in the Corona and Estrada trials, where the trial was much longer than just 2 days per side. And the reason why it's like that is because there's also a lot of opportunity for senators to ask questions from the witnesses. There's also a truth telling aspect to that exercise. and I don't think it will serve the purpose of accountability to rush the trial. The schedule seems to be premised on this idea that the trial must finish by June 30. And I think the statements of my colleagues in UP Law, as well as the statements of some of the other universities and law schools that followed us, make it clear that there should be no concern about the trial not being able to cross over from the 19th to the 20th Congress.
There is also a proposal from the office of Senator Tolentino to trim the impeachment articles from 7 down to 2 to make that expedited trial possible. Ang sabi niya, yung dalawa, doable na yun. Piliin na nila yung sa tingin nila ay meron silang sapat na ebidensya. Sa ganoong paraan ay talagang mapapabilis ito. Is that even legal? I mean, trimming it down?
It did happen in the Corona trial. So there were similarly numerous articles of impeachment in the Corona trial in 2012. Ultimately, if I'm not mistaken, the House ended up presenting just 2 of the articles of impeachment and sought and secured a conviction on that basis. But if I'm not mistaken, in the Corona trial, it was the House that decided to do that. So ultimately, it's the House panel or the House managers who will make that call. Of course, Senator Tolentino and the other senators are free to make that suggestion, but I would, desist from micromanaging. If I were a senator, I would desist from micromanaging the way that the parties present their evidence, since they're supposed to be a neutral arbiter in the case, and therefore they can't get too involved with which evidence which party is presenting.
Okay. But if you take a look at the 7 articles, which do you think are the most potent? I mean, the first one is the conspiracy to assassinate the president, the first lady, and the speaker. The second one is the malversation of 612.5 million in confidential funds. The third article is bribery and corruption in the DepEd. The fourth is unexplained wealth and failure to disclose assets. Article 5 is involvement in extrajudicial killings. Article 6, destabilization, insurrection, and public disorder. And the seventh one is the totality of the respondent's conduct as vice president. Which two are the most potent?
Well, Gretchen, I hope you understand. I really can't comment yet on which ground would be most potent. Myself, and the reason why the UP Law faculty wrote the letters to really ask the Senate to allow the public to see the evidence. But if we go by history, we do have an experience with the SAL-N issue. The failure to disclose accurate statements of assets, liabilities, and net worth indicates a lack of ability. If we go by the Corona impeachment, the lack of an ability to hold the public trust and keep that public trust. So that might be something that they'd want to consider. On the other hand, some of these grounds have been subject of extensive House hearings, and therefore there would be, as expected, a large amount of evidence that the House might want to present. So these would be some of the factors probably that would come into the consideration of the House managers.
I do remember in the impeachment of Joseph Estrada, there was, the opening of the second envelope was put to a vote. If ever this trial gets to that point where the bank accounts of the vice president would be opened, would that also be put to a vote?
We have to put the Estrada bank accounts in a very specific context. As you probably are alluding to, there is a Bank Secrecy Act in the Philippines which prohibits the exposure or the disclosure of bank accounts by banks to the public or to third persons. There's an exception in local currency deposits for impeachment. So impeachment is one of those proceedings that are excluded from the Bank Secrecy Act, for local deposits at least. In the Estrada impeachment, the reason why it was put to a vote was there was an objection on the materiality and relevance of the evidence in relation to the article of impeachment being proven at the time. The position of the defense lawyers was that the second envelope and its supposed contents would not be relevant to the ground for impeachment, which is a legal objection, a fair legal objection. What might be interesting this time is that, or to emphasize, as we do in the UP law statement, is that the people don't like it when we focus on these legal technicalities as a way to stop the truth from coming out. So the reason why EDSA 2 was triggered was because the people didn't see that as a legal objection. They saw it as suppression. And it was a warning that we thought would be good for the Senate in light of the fact that the Senate is also accountable for the trial and the way that it conducts it.
With the relevance of the bank accounts to an article about 3 articles of impeachment that I read a while ago, is it possible to open those accounts without going into a vote?
I think so. The way that this would work, and I wish I could give you a clear answer, but the way that this would work is that procedural objections, if we follow the Corona trial rules, procedural objections are generally addressed to the presiding officer or the Senate president in this case. If there is an objection from any of the senators about that ruling of the presiding officer, then it is put to a vote of the whole Senate. So it might be possible for it to still go through a procedural vote, even if there's no serious objection to it. Now, I'm not saying that there's no objection. I haven't seen the case myself, other than the complaint, and there might be reasons for the defense to ask for the non-disclosure of those accounts. But if any senator asks for a procedural vote under the existing Senate rules, then they would get that. They would have that right.
And if it's possible in the trial itself, could that also be possible to pressure the presiding officer to act now? I mean, to act earlier. It is June 9, I mean, 2 days ahead, 2 days ahead of the calendar that Senate President Jesus Escudero has put out. I know it's not a lot, but is that possible to put that to a vote, to pressure him to have this earlier?
No, I think this goes into the way that the Senate really manages the chamber. And if I'm not mistaken, and this is not currently my field of expertise, the decision to table or to schedule item for agenda is currently with the Senate president. And therefore, they really do take the lead from him. Now, there's a theoretical possibility that if they want it scheduled earlier, they can pressure the Senate president. And the pressure comes from the fact that the senators ultimately get to decide whether or not a Senate president still sits as Senate president. But I don't think they're on the way to that. My sense is that just because it's important to get the trial started before they go on final adjournment, then any sign that the trial would continue, even if it's still on June 11, might be enough just to dissuade any efforts to essentially short-circuit the process.
As we talked about earlier, many universities have already released their statements. There are those going out to the streets. At this point, given the, I guess, the behavior of the Senate, is there any other recourse for the people to take to demand some sort of accountability from the Senate and how it has been acting, how it has not followed the Constitution to proceed forthwith?
So I'm going to go and mention one of the things that's been floated, which is filing a case with the Supreme Court. And there have been, indications from some parties that if the Senate does refuse to act, that they would be prepared to take it all the way to the Supreme Court and ask the Supreme Court to mandate the Senate to issue a writ that would order the Senate to start the trial. But based on my own study and scholarship, there's a reason not to go that route to trigger happily. Bringing in the Supreme Court on this matter is not really consistent with a mature democracy. The Senate is the one that is textually vested by the Constitution with the power of trying an impeachment. And therefore, the first pass at these questions should be with the Senate. Now, if they refuse, the real design of the system is ultimately to hold the senators accountable in elections. And that means that people should be watching these events closely because they might be an indication of which senators have a commitment to constitutional accountability and those which don't. But I'm not discounting entirely the possibility that the Supreme Court can step in. It's just that based on the information that we have now, I'm not yet sure if we're there yet. But that can change very quickly in the next few days.
In simple terms, pwede bang sabihin ng Supreme Court, for example, ikaw, Senate President Jesus Escudero, dinelay mo yung proseso and you should be held accountable. Walang ganon? Walang ganong possibility to hold him accountable for his actions?
I think may kapangyarihan sila, no? Kung gusto talaga nila ipasimulan yung trial, yung paglilitis, pwede nila gawin yun, right? That's within their expanded jurisdiction. But whether to hold Senator Escudero accountable is a different question. In our constitutional system, senators are only disciplined by their own chamber. In the same way that members of the House are disciplined only by their own chamber. So they are not accountable to the Supreme Court or to any court. They're not accountable to the president. If you want a good example, this is what the House did with Representative Teves when they expelled him from the House. That would be the way of the chamber holding their own member accountable. Pero hindi pwede pag-utos ng Korte Suprema yun. Our system doesn't allow it.
Okay, what is the jurisdiction of the Supreme Court in terms of the matters that it can discuss in its court? Because there have been several petitions already filed. One of which is, for example, whether pwedeng tumawid dito from the 19th to the 20th Congress. What is within the bounds of their power?
Look, the Supreme Court has asserted what we call expanded jurisdiction. So, according to the Supreme Court in a 2004 case, which also involved impeachment, that even though impeachment is usually a political question, it's a question that is left to the political branches and one that the court doesn't intervene in. There are standards in the Constitution that place limits on the power of the House and the Senate to conduct impeachment. Or an impeachment trial in the case of the Senate. So when those standards are breached, the Supreme Court can step in. That's something that we've asserted as early as 2004. But just because the Supreme Court has the power to step in doesn't mean that it always steps in or that it should step in. There is what we call requisites for judicial review. There are many other prudential devices that they use to avoid deciding highly politicized questions. We don't know yet whether the court will use those devices to avoid deciding a petition that was filed before them. Although it is worth noting that the petitions that were filed in February asked for immediate relief, and the Supreme Court has not granted any of them yet. So it looks like the court is also waiting and seeing.
Hindi ba maaari ring magkaroon ng constitutional crisis kung sakasakaling hindi sumunod itong Senate? And is that something that they're also being very careful about? Because ultimately, I mean, don't you see it heading that way? Kasi kung tumawid ito, magkaroon tayo ng mag-convene as an impeachment court, hindi rin talaga sapat yung oras, tatawid din talaga dito sa 20th Congress. If hindi siya tumawid, there could also be cases filed. What are your thoughts on that end? How do you see this playing out?
Yeah, no, it's a difficult question. And pag impeachment kasi, you have to recognize that we don't hold trials frequently. We hold them once every decade plus a few years. So a lot of the rules that could have been clarified are not really clarified until they are there, right, before the Senate.
Yes.
So the possibility of a constitutional crisis hangs over any form of impeachment. But I mean that it's only a constitutional crisis if the branches don't act according to their duties and their powers. So I wouldn't want to put, or ayoko pangunahan, no? yung constitutional crisis na yun by assuming that the Senate will not do its job or that the Supreme Court will overstep its bounds. I do think that the Senate will ultimately continue with the trial. I do think that the Supreme Court, if it intervenes, will intervene in a prudential way. But I think if you look at the system that we have as a whole, the only reason why it's worked is that there's a conscious recognition by the branches of the extent and the limits of their powers. And I'm hoping that at least this impeachment, even though it presents very difficult questions, so will call to the better selves of our leaders and that they will act in accordance with accountability.
And that, of course, is under the presumption that people understand what impeachment is all about. I mean, most of the Philippine population, at least. But this week, we will see how our Senate leaders confront this issue as the Senate adjourns. Correct me if I'm wrong. Sine die, tama ba? Or sine die?
Sine die.
Sine die. That,
Yeah.
I've
But
been
it is an
waiting for the
interesting
correct
point,
pronunciation.
Gretchen. Yeah, like when you think about it, the only reason why we averted crises in the past impeachments was the people remained involved. And that's a call for citizens to stay involved with impeachment, to go past the legalese and all of these formalities and really look at the core question of, did Vice President Duterte violate her constitutional duties? Is the Senate fulfilling its duty to try her fairly? The people's involvement here puts a pressure on the branches to ensure that they are acting accordingly.
Well, we will get to see what happens in the coming days. In the meantime, thank you so much for explaining all of that with us. We have Professor Paulo Tamase of UP Law.
Thank you.
Retired Supreme Court Associate Justice Adolfo Ascuna, one of the framers of the 1987 Constitution, asserted that the Senate is constitutionally mandated to immediately conduct the impeachment trial of Vice President Sara Duterte. Citing the use of the word forthwith in the Charter's impeachment provisions, Ascuna said this term clearly requires prompt action. He emphasized that the articles of impeachment transmitted to the Senate during the 19th Congress do not expire and must carry over into the 20th Congress. Ascuna warned that dismissing the case without the trial would violate the Constitution and could be challenged in the Supreme Court or reversed in the next Congress. Senator-elect Tito Soto criticized the delay in acting on the impeachment articles against Vice President Sara Duterte, which the Senate received on February 5. Soto said Senate President Chis Escudero should not have unilaterally withheld the referral and should have immediately endorsed the articles to the Committee on Rules. He warned that the delay created confusion and disrupted the expected flow of proceedings. Soto also called for a caucus to properly address the issue and allow the Senate to decide collectively.
The Senate President is just the presiding officer. He's not the Senate. Let the Senate decide. It should be a caucus. There should be a meeting of the Committee on Rules and discuss it. Are we going to constitute ourselves into a impeachment court? Di ba? O nag-hearing ba tayo? Nakapag-hearing sila ng kung ano-ano eh. Di ba? During the break eh.
Senator Francis Tolentino stands firm that the articles of impeachment filed under the 19th Congress against must not cross to the 20th Congress. In his manifestation, Tolentino expressed his belief that the Senate cannot carry unfinished proceedings into the next Congress. According to him, allowing the takeover would be ultra vires or beyond our constitutional power. Tolentino also cited the Senate's mandate to proceed with the impeachment trial forthwith after receiving a complaint from the House of Representatives. He noted that it has been over 100 days already since the House transmitted the articles of impeachment against Vice President Sara Duterte. Don't go away. We'll be back with more stories right after the break. Good morning, I'm Gretchen Ho, and here on Morning Matters, we talk about the most pressing issues and give you the context behind the headlines. The House Tri-Committee calls for the passage of bills that seek to penalize the spread of disinformation. Committee member Congressman Dan Fernandez said the measures should be certified as urgent by President Bongbong Marcos. His statement comes as the Tri-Com concluded its hearings on fake news. During the hearing, several lawmakers castigated social media personalities for spreading lies on social media. Let's discuss that further with Manila's 6th District Representative Benny Abante. Good morning. Welcome to Morning Matters.
Good morning, Gretchen.
Okay. Unang-una, kakamustahin ko lang po kayo, no? Kasi kayo po ay tumakbo nitong eleksyon.
Yes.
Pero hindi po pinala. What do you think happened there?
Well, actually, nagtaka kami. Even my own leaders were very much surprised. Kasi the last survey, I was 40%. Ang lamang ko sa kalaban ko.
Do you think your hearings, you took a hit from all of the hearings conducted? Because nasa nasa forefront po kayo nitong Quadcom, nitong Tricom.
Most probably. We're still studying it. Pero meron namang ibang nangyari. So, palagay ko, makakabalik ako.
Makakabalik kayo. Oo, kasi hindi lang po kayo,
The
pati
thing
si
is,
Dan Fernandez din.
The thing is, gusto ko nang pahinga. It's been that the Quadcom hearing has been very stressful for us, actually.
Why?
Well, because, syempre, may mga kalaban ka, binabash ka. At one time, I had 6,000 bashers, no? Nabawasan na ng
Paano nyo
malaki.
nabilang yung 6,000?
Kasi meron kaming we have 100 of our young people are actually deleting all of those. And they were counting it.
The comments on your Facebook page?
Yes. Yes.
Okay, and what...
Hindi ko nga binabasa I'm not reading it.
And,
so I'm not actually affected by it because, I refuse to read those.
And of course, this led you to this investigation into fake news, the hearings on disinformation. After so many months, ano po yung findings po ng Tri-Committee?
Well, that must be regulated. Sa amin, there ought to be some state regulations passed on it. Aside from having a self-regulatory powers that non-government organizations have, kinakailangan din naman na the government must have its own regulatory powers on it. Hindi pwedeng maging absolute ang kapangyarihan ng because the thing is, some trolls and some bloggers are using the privilege of the media, of the legitimate media. Hindi naman, the legitimate media will not in any way try to be like those people. Nagmumura, things like this.
And speaking of that, kayo na po nagbanggit, no? Yung pagmumura, hindi po ba freedom of speech din yun? Kumbaga, ini-express nyo yung sarili nyo, galit kayo, kunwari, minsan nasaktan kayo, napamura kayo, hindi ba parte po yun ng ating freedom of expression? At the same time, kumbaga, if minura ko kayo, theoretically, kung ano po yung consequence nun, it's mine to bear. Because I used my freedom of expression kung magalit po kayo sa akin. But to put that under the classification of disinformation and fake news and what should be regulated, isn't that also a little bit too much?
Pero that's not being used in the primetime media. Hindi ginagamit yan ng professional journalist, yung pagmumura. Wala pa ako narinig nung araw na nagmura ang professional journalist, kahit sino pa ang nagkamali. Look, freedom of expression, for example, in a private, personal moment na pinag-uusapan yan, yes, but not in the media.
But we are talking about journalism,
Yes,
right? But
yes.
how about the vloggers? For example, meron pong, I think, nagmura po sa inyo, minura po kayo, certain Joey Cruz.
Yes.
Parang sinabi po niya, Congressman Abante, pasweldohan ka ng taxpayer GAGO.
That's right.
Oo. Pero hindi siya journalist, vlogger po siya. At sa kanyang channel niya ginawa yun.
But why is it that they were telling people that they're journalists? Sinasabi nila, journalist sila eh. They're saying, journalist sila. I'm a journalist. In fact, nakausap po yung ibang mga vloggers.
Yung iba po, pero hindi lahat. Paano naman po? How do you make the distinction?
Hindi lahat na nila. The thing is this, okay, for example, like, ginagawa kong GAGO. Alright, number one, tama ba yun? Anong ebidensya niya ako GAGO? Di ba? Tama ba yun? I mean, that's even fake information. Tama ba na tawagin niya akong GAGO? O, GAGO ba ako? O, bakit ka tinawag akong GAGO?
Hindi po ba dapat din kapag kayo ay public official, may kapal ng mukha din kayo to tolerate
Totoo yun.
all of the criticism hurled against you because it is public office?
And they are all tolerated, Gretchen. The thing is this is an investigation. I mean, we're not trying to be onion skin when it comes to that. Ibig sabihin lamang, sa investigasyon na ito, ay titinan na maigi kung talaga ba ito ay freedom of expression ba ito? You mean, you use Latin language and that's freedom of expression. Ibig sabihin, pwede ka nang magsabi na kung ano-ano, kahit na hindi tama, kahit na mali, for example, kahit nakakasakit ng damdamin, that's unjust vexation, for
Pero
example.
paano po kung galit po talaga sila sa inyo at yun ang totoo para sa kanila?
Okay, ang sabi ko ganito, kilala niyo ba ako? Alam niyo ba ginagawa ko? Oo, I do not even know you. You do not even know what I'm trying to do. You see? I mean, why would you make a blanket statement na lahat na? Di ba? I mean, okay, banggitin mo yung pangalan. O, GAGO ako. Bakit mo sinabi yun? Yun ang gusto kong malaman. Gusto kong malaman, ba't mo sinabi yun? Anong ebidensya mo na totoo yung GAGO?
Para sa kanya po, yun ang nararamdaman niya. Because there are facts and there are feelings.
Yun ang sinasabi
and there
nilang
are expressions, opinion. Oo, para po sa kanya.
Yes,
and given that kayo po ay nahahalo-halo nyo nga po, isn't there a danger of classifying opinion as false information? And if you, for example, that is your opinion, galit po kayo sa mga minumura po kayo online, and kung meron po kayong kaaway sa politika, this law that you are thinking of legislating against disinformation could be used against you by the next administration.
In fact, during the campaign, even the COMELEC, meron silang mga dinisqualify na nagsasabi ng mga ganung mga salita. Alright. Ibig sabihin, it is not welcome in a civilized, cultured society. And we are that. We're not what kind of a society are we?
No, I think you're referring to
pwede mo na
attorney.
sabihin lahat yung mga bagay.
Were you referring to Attorney Ayan Sia of Pasig? Siya po ay may mga vulgar statements against the vulnerable and women. I think that's very
that's
particular.
too much.
Oo,
That's
particular
too
po
much.
'yun kasi
Oo.
medyo na-undermine naman po niya, na-insulto niya sila. But
Meron pa yatang iba.
Hindi po ba parang pwede naman na kayo na lang ang mag-file ng unjust vexation or cybercrime use that, invoke the cybercrime law against yung mga nagmura po sa inyo, imbes na creating one blanket legislation to regulate what is posted online.
Binag-aaralan namin yan, Gretchen. I mean, we have laws, for example, cybercrime, libel, slander, unjust vexation. Yung mga batas na yan, for example, anong ibig sabihin ito? Ibig sabihin that we would like to promote decency in the media. Okay lang yan sa mga kanto ng mga ganyan, mga inuman na ganyan, talaga nangyayari yan. You know that? And very exclusive yan, but not in the media. General General yan Now, kami, wala ba kami karapatan sumagot yan? Are we onion skin when we answer those things? No, we're not. We're just trying to say, tama ba ito? Ba't mo ko tinawag na gano'n?
But it is also, tama po kayo, it is also within your right to file cases
Yes,
against
yes.
these individuals
Yes.
in a personal capacity. But doesn't it make it redundant to come up with another law na marami na po tayong ganitong batas na pwede nyo na pong gamitin?
Actually, ang pinag-uusapan namin dyan, most of the laws that we're filing are actually amendments to other existing laws. See? But when it comes to regulation, dapat meron talagang batas on that regulation. Ano ba ang purpose ng regulation? Ano ba ang subject ng regulation? Ano objectives ng regulation? Are we going to allow? I mean, you look at other countries, they're not allowing those things to
Which countries po?
Whether it be Germany. Germany has actually banned TikTok. Germany, the president of Germany has banned TikTok recently. Oh, even Donald Trump will not allow those things to happen.
And
In
actually, I
other
think he stopped. Dapat mababa na nga po ang TikTok, pero that was because of national security concern.
Yes, that's right. Now, the thing is,
Not because
sa
of
atin,
misinformation.
alam mo, pinagmamasdan ko rin yung ibang bansa, wala naman silang ganun eh. I mean, sa Pilipinas lang yun eh. Oh, nauso lang yan when we start investigating some people. Oo, nauso lang eh. Hindi naman uso nung araw yan eh. Gretchen eh.
I understand your concerns kasi it becomes also, there are troll farms that are employed as a strategy to pressure or harass
Ibig sabihin, binabiyara.
you. Oo, may ganun po.
May ganun.
How do you legislate? I mean, are you looking also into that? Meron po ba tayong investigasyon heading that way to be able to detect these troll farms?
Alam mo,
pag-usapan na po ba natin yun?
because mag-e-end na ang 19th Congress, I'm hoping that this will be continuing. Ibig sabihin, sa 20th Congress, the TRICOM will still be there. Although ibang tao na nandun. Iba yung, alam mo, Gretchen, iba yung TRICOM sa Quadcom, ha? Iba yung iniimbestigahan sa Quadcom, ha? Iba naman yung TRICOM.
EJK at yung
Pero
drugs.
the thing is this, because of the Quadcom hearings we have, nagkaroon kami ng maraming bashers, nagkaroon ng maraming trolls, may ilang mga vloggers na binabayaran ng sinamang tao. At because of that, nagkaroon ng TRICOM. Napag-usapan na yung meron kaming committee on public information. Oo. Meron committee on public order.
Pero
Kailangan
Congressman,
pag-usapan na ito.
can you help me define what is false information?
Well, when we speak of false information or fake information, is this, hindi totoo ito doon sa sinasabi mo sa tao. For example, tinawag mo akong GAGO. Ang tanong ganito, ba't mo ako tinawag na ganyan? What's your evidence? Do you know me? Oo. Do you know what I'm doing? I mean, bakit? Yan ba totoo ba yan? Because the people will look. Alam mo naman ang mga kababayan natin, no? Very simple people yan. I mean, GO pala
Pero
si Congressman.
pero paano nga po kung totoo 'yun para doon sa taong nagsabi nun? 'Di ba? Paano kung para sa kanya ganun po kayo dahil kumare hindi niya kayo gusto?
We have to define what GAGO means, actually.
O yun nga po, even that, we don't have a
Kailangan
formal
na.
definition. And given that, that definition of false information,
Are we now going to accept yung mga mura sa media? For example, like in GAGO, mura yan. Alright? Sabihin mo sa tao na luko-luko siya. Mura ba yan? O totoo yan? Kasi kung totoo yan, dapat sa mental hospital yan. Di ba? Kung mura lang yan, hindi totoo yun.
hindi po ba subjective naman yun? I mean, kasi kumare, ang maganda para sa isang tao, hindi maganda para sa iba.
Anything can be subjective to anyone saying it, di ba?
Kaya nga, but it
But
doesn't mean that it's false,
does not
right?
mean that if it's said to a person like me, that I'm going to accept it, di ba? So I also have the right to answer that. Am I right?
Yes, you have the right to answer that through
Okay.
your social media. I mean, you can also post about
Yeah.
it, refuting it
Oo.
under your own freedom of expression.
because-
Paano kung para sa inyo, GAGO din yun, yung taong yun?
But because, in fact, ito, tinawag ang gobyerno na TAN-GA for example, yan, na strike ko, tinawag ng GA. When I also used that word to her, nagalit siya. Hindi siya magagalit. Ibig sabihin, kung ako bilang public official, tinanggap ko. Ba siya magagalit pa binalik sa kanya? So therefore, if she respects freedom of expression, if she wants me to respect that, then he should also respect mine. You see? Ganun lang yun.
But I guess the question here is not really about anger, but about committing a crime.
Yeah.
In the legal sense of it. That's why we're talking about legislating. Ano naman po ang proteksyon na maaaring makamit ng mga talagang nagbibigay ng valid na kritisismo sa gobyerno? Sabi niyo po, ito nga po yung TNGA na sinabi sa gobyerno. Paano kung valid naman po ang kritisismo? Hindi po ba maaaring maabuso rin ito? At matakot na magsalita ang mga tao.
Magandang tanong yan, Gretchen. And we're looking into that also. Ibig sabihin, hindi lamang yung regulatory measures na pinag-uusapan yan, but also protective measures to protect those that are actually legitimate. Alright. So, kinakailangan din naman natin i-define. Ano ba yung legitimate? Ano ba yung illegitimate? You see that? Kaya itong sa amin lang, at akin personally, the freedom of expression is not an absolute, di ba, code. Code, di ba? Hindi absolute yan eh. I mean, kinakailangan din malaman ng tao na
pero
hindi mo pwede sabihin na gusto mong sabihin.
Who determines what is factual? Ito po ay natanong na rin po ito sa ibang programa, sa Storycon. Who is the arbiter of truth here?
Actually.
If you were to set up a truth commission, who will say what is false and what is factual?
The Constitution make a general rule. It is Congress that actually put substance to what the Constitution says. Diba? Ganun yun eh. I mean, kami yung nagbibigay ang Congress na nagbibigay ng batas ayon sa Constitution. Kundi ayon yan, di-dismiss ng Supreme Court yan. Diba? So, ibig sabihin, itong body of general rules na ito, actually, hindi ito yung nagbibigay ng crime eh. Nagbibigay ng crime yung ginagawa ng Kongreso. That's the reason why merong libel, merong slander.
Totoo po. Pero sino po ang naiisip ninyong maaaring maging parte nung yun nga, yung magde-determine what is false and what is factual?
It's still Congress.
It's Congress. Lawmakers will determine if something is false.
But you've got to realize that lawmakers, for example, like the Senate has 24. Lawmakers,
but aren't you also beholden to political interests? For example, nung panahon ni Duterte, para sa kanila, hindi totoo ang EJK. Pero para sa administrasyong Marcos, totoo ang EJK.
Say for example,
ano po yun?
Say for example, Gretchen, nag-file ako out of my own personal interest. But you've got to remember there are 300 congressmen. All right.
Who are beholden to political interests.
And that will be decided upon by the majority. So hindi lang naman ako eh. Oo. Maaring i-put down ako ng ibang mga congressmen on that. Because, siyempre, representative kami ng tao. All right. And marami naman mga congressmen that they're not making laws out of their own personal interest. You see. So, ibig sabihin kahit na Congress yan, binigyan ng mandato ng Constitution yan, ng Senado yan, still naniniwala tayo, and the people should realize na Congress will do its best to regulate and to protect.
Pero yun nga po, kagaya ng pag-usapan natin nung simula pa lang, ay siguro marami kayong naging kaaway dahil dito sa investigasyon. Paano po kung gamitin po ito, no? Laban sa mga hindi natitipuhan ng administrasyon o kaya ng mga malalakas na forces o impluensya dito po sa usapang politika.
Siguro.
Nakikita po natin sa kahit yung impeachment nga po ay hindi pa nasisimulan.
Siguro kinakailangan na lang mag-ingat tayo sa sabihin natin. Siguro kinakailangan na lang na, okay, am I civilized? Am I cultured? Ito ba yun na pag-aralan ko sa magulang ko? Mga ganun bagay ba? Oo. Kaya tinanong ko rin yan eh. Ano bang upbringing mo? I mean, tinuruan ka ba ng magulang mo na magsalita ng ganito? Why do you have the freedom to say it now? when alam mo that these are certain disciplines, even in the home, that you're not allowed to do it. Ako, Gretchen, ang magulang ko niya nagmumura. Hindi ko pa narinig ang magulang ko nagmura. So, hindi kami sanay sa gumumura. For example, like PI. Oo. Is that an expression? Is PI an expression? Are we going to accept that? Oo. No, yung PI, minumura mo yung nanay mo. You're accusing your own mother of things na, I mean, is that an expression?
Kayo
Are
po
we
ba ay
going to accept that?
nag-file ng kaso dito sa nagmura sa inyo?
Hindi na. I mean, because, look, pag pagbayad ka ng kaso, pagbabayad ka ng abogado, ano ka pa ng kono, masyadong maraming
But the
intriga.
law enables you and empowers you to do that.
Iniintindi ko na lang.
Oo. Oo.
Iniintindi ko
Hindi
na lang.
ba pwedeng gano'n na lang din?
Maaring may dahilan sila.
Parang gusto niyo po yung tinawag niyong TNJ yung follower, dapat intindihin na lang din niyo
Yes,
yung pinanggagalingan
yes,
ninyo.
yes.
Bakit hindi na lang po magkaintindihan?
Ayun, maganda yun.
Imbis na i-legislate po
Maganda yun sa
natin
akin.
na marami pong mabubusalan yung bibig.
Oo, maganda yung
di ba?
sanayin mo. That's good.
Oo.
Sa akin, ganun eh. Intindihan na lang kami. For example, like, sa akin eh, yung bang, tinala lang natin maigi, ano ba talaga ang magandang sabihin? I mean, yung pwede naman yung pag-usapan, di ba?
Pero hindi niyo po ba, syempre, of course, it comes with the job. Whatever you say and do in the public sphere, and even this interview will get you bashed and criticized,
Actually,
and you cannot stop it.
Actually, Gretchen, I have been in politics since 1992. Never experienced that. Never experienced that.
Nanabash po kayo?
Na-experience ko lang yan.
Baka
sa Quadcom
kasi sumisikat na po kayo, kaya ganon.
Maaaring ganon, pero
At parte po yun. Okay, ano po ang aasahan po natin dito sa Tri-Committee? Will you submit a report? What kind of bills are you looking at?
Well,
Meron na po ba tayo na pag-usapan?
that would be tackled in the plenary. The committee report will be approved by the plenary, and then hopefully it will continue on the 20th Congress, and whatever has been filed, whether it be amending the existing laws or putting up a bill on regulatory measures and protective measures. Siyempre, hindi na pwedeng pag-usapan ngayon yan. I-refile na lang yan sa 20th Congress.
Are you also looking at somehow making the platforms accountable for what is allowed to be posted online?
Yes, of course.
Because there is individual responsibility and there is a bigger responsibility by the platforms.
Merong
Ano
penalty
po
yan
yung
eh.
ano natin? Ano po yung
Merong
mga findings
penalty
po
yan.
natin doon?
Well, just like libel, ako nga nung araw, libel should not anymore be a crime eh. Sa akin nung araw. Ngayon, nagbabago na yung iniisip ko. Dapat talaga maging crime na rin yun eh. So, pag-uusapan pa namin yan. We're not through with it yet, actually. Marami pang dapat pag-usapan yan.
So, hindi pa tapos ang
Hindi pa.
hearing? Oo.
Hindi pa.
Oo.
Tinatapos lang namin because it's the 19th Congress almost over.
Hindi po ba, libel is criminal now? I mean, yun nga po yung nilalaban ng iba.
Libel is criminal, actually. Meron penalty yan eh.
Yeah, it is a criminal offense under Philippine law.
Yes. Ako, gusto kong tanggalin
ano
yun
po
eh.
ibig sabihin? Gusto niyo tanggalin?
Gusto kong tanggalin yung penalty, yung bigiging crime ng libel.
Okay.
Gusto kong tanggalin yun.
What kind of penalties are you seeing?
Parang civil law na magbabayad ka na lang ng pero hindi ka na ikukulong. Kasi may kulong pa yan eh. Hindi ka na ikukulong.
Pero dito po sa mga platforms, ano po nakikita niyong penalty? At anong klaseng regulasyon ang dapat nilang gawin?
Well, sa akin kung talagang masyado ng down to earth, masyado ng gutter language na ginagamit yan dapat meron ng penalty yan eh.
Yun po talaga. Yun po talaga yung pinaka-kinaiinisan po ninyo.
Ako naman I'm all for decency. Bakit? Kasi marami tayong mga bata eh. Pag narinig ng mga bata, ginagamit mo yan sa media. Gagawin nila yan eh. Just imagine, yung the word PI, sinasabi yan ng leaders ng bansa natin. The children are actually, wala naman palang ano yun eh, kabastusan yun. Hindi naman pala bastos yun eh. So, ginagamit na ng kabataan. What we are trying to do is protect our own children from saying those things later
But
in
isn't
life.
that also the responsibility of the parent
Yes,
to teach the kid
that is true.
and to handle or manage the social media use of
Yes.
their kid?
But you've got to remember, Gretchen, that the parents are quite limited on that. You see that they go to school, they learn that from the adults, and they're saying, "Oh, bakit?" Sinasabi ng adult to, bakit ganon? For example, like, sabihin ng tatay, bawal manigarilyo anak ka, pero naninigarilyo siya. Even that's the reason why people are doing it. You see, sa akin, let's protect our kids.
Yeah, but
by protecting our
sabi niyo
kids,
po,
ipagwawala natin yung mga bagay
sabi
na
niyo
yan
po,
sa
Kongreso,
media.
dapat maging mag-act as the Truth Commission dito. How do we ensure, how sure are we that the Senate and the Congress is the beacon of decency? Kung kahit nga po ang mga politiko nagmumura.
That's right. And the thing is, nagmumura sila, not in the plenary. Wala pa ako narinig sa plenary na ang politiko nagmura. I mean, have you heard the senator make a privileged speech sa pagmumura? No, you haven't. Have you heard the congressman
So
do that?
si PRRD,
No.
nagmumura po.
Si PRRD. That's the reason why sinasabi ko, when the president say that, na tama yun, sabihin ng mga bata, tama.
Paano kung panahon po niya at kung para sa kanya ay acceptable itong pagmumura?
Well, actually, even if leaders are doing that, it doesn't necessarily mean acceptable yan.
So maybe it should be in the hands of somebody else to define what is acceptable and what is
Well,
not.
we are still a democratic country, Gretchen. Sa socialist country, iba yan. Iba magiging...
Which is exactly the argument of the journalists na, I mean, we have standards and we have, meron po kaming mag-regulate sa amin yung KDP, pati yung aming mga boss at mga network po namin. But also in the social media realm, kung ano po yung nilabas po ninyo, babalik din sa inyo. That is the essence of free speech. You responsible for your words. And dito naman po, of course, we are responsible for our words.
Yeah,
Meron pong mekanismong ganon. Pero also, on the flip side, ayaw naman din po namin sabihin, ayaw din po namin maramdaman na natatakot kaming ilabas itong storya dahil there could be somebody who does not see it as factual or para sa kanya, hindi yun ang truth niya. Pero kung ito ang nalalaman naming katotohanan o facts at nilalabas po namin, what stops the politician from saying, ay hindi totoo yan, dapat you are in violation of this act?
It still is more of a democratic democratic decision because we're a democracy. But the thing is this, you have to admit, Gretchen, that legitimate media has not used those kind of language in the past, nor in the present. No one is...
I could not affirm that because kahit sa radyo, meron pong ilan na gumagamit ng explicit language.
Okay.
Tao din naman po kami. Oo. At meron tayong mga korte na maaaring mag-decide
That's
po
right.
yan,
That's
diba?
right. Totoo yun.
So, pwede rin doon pag-usapan na if you
Yes.
have existing laws.
Yes.
Alright, good luck po with the rest of your term. Ilang araw na lang.
Hanggang
Kung
June
aasahan
30
po sa
na
inyo.
lang.
Oo.
Yes,
Sige po. Maraming salamat
you,
para sa
Gretchen.
inyong
Thank you
oras
for
sa
the
pagpapaliwanag. We have Congressman Benny Abante joining us on Morning Matters today. That wraps up today's episode. We hope we've given you the right start to your morning. Let's go ahead and make the day matter. My name is Gretchen Ho. We are One News, all sides, all the time.